Good morning, everybody. We're pleased to be joined today by Lieutenant General Charles Q. Brown, Jr., who is the commander of U.S. Air Force's Central Command, giving us an update today on Operation Inherent Resolve. General, we'll turn it over to you for any opening comments, and we'll come back here for questions.
All right, thanks a lot, Jeff. Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to have the opportunity to speak to you today on behalf of the men and women of the 60 nations that make up the coalition, over 60 nations that make up the coalition supporting Operation Inherent Resolve and also resolute support. It's my distinct honor to serve as the commander of United States Air Force's Central Command and as the Combined Forces Air Component Commander for Central Command. As a CFAC, I'm charged to lead and be part of our 19-nation air coalition in support of OIR that is committed to defeating Daesh, while helping set the conditions for improved security and stability in the region. In parallel, I'm responsible for delivering air power to Afghanistan and across the 20-nation CENTCOM area responsibility. The coalition, whether in resolute support or inherent resolve, continues to do phenomenal work making air power look easy. As you've likely heard before, we're conducting the most precise air campaign in history. We're able to attrit Daesh and its capabilities anytime, anywhere, while taking very deliberate steps to minimize impact to the civilian population. There is no doubt Coalition Air Power has and continues to dramatically dismantle Daesh's ability to fight and conduct operations in Iraq and Syria. Coalition airstrikes are effectively targeting critical Daesh capabilities as we continue to see positive results. When I came before you, this group last, I highlight the notable success in targeting Daesh financial resources, particularly successful strikes on oil facilities and on monetary centers. These strikes have definitely had the desired effect, negatively affecting Daesh's ability to pay fighters and fund operations. In addition to the continued strikes on Daesh's financial means, most recently, the focus has been on logistic and command and control targets in both Iraq and Syria. The upcoming video of two recent strikes in Raqqa, Syria, and Rupa, Iraq, demonstrate the capabilities Coalition Air Power brings to the table on a daily basis. Can you go ahead and please play the video? Now, the strikes are an important operational element in advance of or in support of ground maneuver. This first part of the video shows a B-52 strike in Raqqa destroying a Daesh weapons cache with 5 precision-guided munitions. This is one of many strikes conducted to degrade Daesh's logistics capability. The second part of the video shows a strike by US F-16s and French Mirage 2000s that were tasked dynamically to destroy a Daesh defensive fighting position. They employed 3 precision-guided munitions to successfully destroy the target. This strike was conducted to disrupt Daesh's defenses as the Iraq forces moved to retake Rupa. It is strikes like these that, in my perspective, put more pressure on Daesh, decreases their ability to emplace and employ IEDs and/or mount an offensive attack. As the air component, we are actively working to keep Daesh on the defense, enable ground forces to maneuver against as little resistance as possible. While there is consistent progress and positive momentum, now is not the time to pat ourselves on the back. There is still work to be done. As the Air Coalition, we will do our part to persistently strike key targets in the deep fight, and will continue to integrate Coalition Air Power with ground force maneuver. Regardless of the pace of operation on the ground, we will use Coalition Air Power, its operational reach and flexibility, its precision and lethality, and its constant presence and responsiveness to pressure, to destroy, and eventually defeat Daesh. And with that, Jeff, I'm ready to take questions.
We're going to do Phil Donahue style today, so I'll start with Lita.
Hi, General. It's Lolita Baldor with the Associated Press. Can you give us a sort of a more detailed sense of the fight in Fallujah and what issues or problems the coalition is having in trying to do airstrikes there, considering the number of citizens in the city? Are you seeing a lot of citizens leaving? Do you have a sense of how many are still there? And do you have any sense of the number of enemy fighters that are still in the city? Thank you.
Well, from an air perspective, I don't have a really good sense on really the number of fighters that are in the area, but I'll tell you kind of how we actually do the campaign in support of the operations there. And so from a broad perspective, we have increased the number of strikes in Fallujah in comparison to other areas in the campaign over the course of the past week. And the way we do that is through the use of our Joint Operations Center that sits, in this case, particularly probably Baghdad, that's working and they sit side by side with the Iraqis to identify the particular targets we're going to strike dynamically in coordination with the Iraqis as the Iraqi forces move. From a operational standpoint, what I have seen is that you do see positive momentum and movement into Fallujah as they execute. As far as the civilians, I can't really speak to because I'm not watching that as closely. But I will tell you that one of the things we do as we work with the strikes in coordination with the Iraqis or the deliberate strikes we execute is to take great care to minimize any type of civilian casualties. But we really haven't seen that I've seen great movement of civilians out of the city at this point.
One quick follow-up, just on a separate topic. There's been a lot of talk from the Russians about wanting to coordinate more with the U.S. over Syria. Can you say whether or not you've encountered any difficulties with Russian aircraft in the airspace over Syria, either getting in the way or other problems that would lead to further discussions about possibly considering some type of coordination?
Really, if you look at the operations, really since the Russians started flying back in September, and even with the MOU that's been in the place, we've really seen very little or any issues with the Russians in execution, and primarily because of where our objectives and their objectives. Although what they said was one thing, is they were going to go after Daesh, which is probably not the case. It's mostly in support of the regime. So we don't necessarily fly in the same locations. If there's one area that we probably come closer together, it's in northwest Syria, north of Aleppo and around Aleppo. We tend to fly north of Aleppo, and they tend to fly a bit south. So by and large, we have not had any issues when we really look at the MU, which is designed for safety of flight. We don't do any coordination with the Russians. We don't necessarily have any real concerns. I will tell you, we have a very professional phone calls that go back and forth between the coalition, the phone line we have here with the Russians, to work through the MOU to ensure safety of flight for the coalition, all the coalition, and as well as our operations. So we do not have a safety of flight issue with the Russians.
Hi, General. This is Marcus Weisgerber with Defense One. I wanted to ask you, there have been some reports about the OV-10 actually making an appearance again in the skies over the battlefield in Iraq and Syria. So basically, I wanted to ask, what are you using the plane? Can you confirm the report that it's out there? What are you using the plane for? And I guess, what is the future of the OV-10 in this mission that you have?
Well, that was actually not done under the air component. It was done under some special ops and a kind of a test program. That happened earlier in the year, and to be honest with you, it was a short term, and we haven't. I don't have any real details to be able to share with you as far as what the current status is, since we weren't necessarily working at real time from our location here.
As a follow-up, there was a debate over at AFCENT years ago, 5 to 8 years ago, about whether or not planes like the OV-10 or the Super Tucano or the AT-6 have a place in the skies over Iraq, Afghanistan, elsewhere where there's a permissive environment. Where do you stand on that issue? Is this something that's even being considered anymore? And just kind of what are your thoughts on whether or not planes like that could be helpful?
Well, the example I would use is the A-29s that are in Afghanistan right now that the Afghan Air Force are flying. And so it's a platform like that has a pretty robust capability, pretty easy to fly, pretty easy to maintain, which is really a great platform for a smaller Air Force that's coming up. So in a permissive environment, that airplane works perfectly. In a non-permissive environment, it's probably not as capable a platform.
Hi, General. It's Courtney Cubey with NBC News. I have two questions. First is just something that you said towards the end of your opening statement that I found kind of curious. You said that regardless of the pace of the operations on the ground, the air campaign would continue. What did you mean by that? Are you anticipating some sort of a slowdown of the pace of operations on the ground?
No, I mean, there's times where, based on the pace of our partners, where some things are going faster and some days are going slower. But from my perspective as the air component, we have the flexibility in the range to continue to put pressure on it on a daily basis. And so my goal as the air component is to actually put pressure on Dash wherever they are, whether there's a ground force there or not. And so if things get slowed down, or if there's changes based on weather, those kinds of things, then I still believe the air component can take advantage of our capabilities to continue to put pressure on Dash and not give them any respite or sanctuary in any location. So I'm always pressing really hard to use our air power as much as possible. And personally, I get frustrated sometimes where we're not using our capability to its full capability. We do by and large, but I'm always looking to improve upon how we're doing business.
And then if I could also ask you about an announcement that the Kurds made earlier this week about the very beginning of a campaign to go move south towards Raqqa with tens of thousands of troops. Can you give us any kind, I understand not wanting to give the ISIS a preview of what you're planning, but can you give us any sort of an idea of what the air campaign is going to look like? Are you anticipating a dramatic increase in coalition activity north of Raqqa in the coming weeks and months to help sort of pave the way for those troops moving south?
Well, I'll tell you, the model we use, and I think it's been fairly effective, not when you're talking Raqqa or any other location throughout the combined joint operating area, is we're able to, as the air component, we're able to strike ahead of the ground maneuver. And so that's my goal. And if I know where the next fight's going to be, then what I want to be able to do is actually soften up that with strikes ahead of the ground maneuver. And we found that when we do that, the resistance that the ground forces face seems to be less for a number of reasons. One of the reasons, I think, is because we start taking fighters off the battlefield. The second piece, and this is what I share with my staff, if you're looking over your shoulder worried about an airstrike, you have a hard time building defensive positions or building IEDs or booby traps, so when the ground force gets there. And so my goal really is to in any case where we see that the ground force is going to maneuver, is to strike ahead of that and try to at least interrupt the logistics to where that next fight might be. And that's the beauty of being an airman. I think we have the capability to do some of those things, to strike in some areas that are away from the close fight, so that those fighters can't get to that next fight and strike them in advance is really my goal, versus striking when they're in contact.
Hi, General. This is Christina Wong from The Hill. I want to ask you a general question. Can you give us a sense of the number of spy planes and other surveillance aircraft or assets over Iraq and Syria, and can you characterize how much that presence has grown over the last year?
Well, I mean, let me just give you a general number of what number of airplanes we have airborne on a daily basis. So on a daily basis, we got anywhere from 150 to 160 aircraft that are airborne over Iraq and Syria 24/7. And that mix changes, and it's a mix of strike capability, it's a mix C2 capability, ISR capability, and we use all those together in order to execute the campaign. Tankers is another big piece, which gives us the ability to stay airborne for the periods of time that we do. So it's really a mix of capability to execute the air campaign.
Can you talk specifically about the ISR component of that?
Well, without getting into numbers, I will tell you that there's never enough ISR. And if there's one piece that I know that the CJTF and the ground component asked for, is more ISR. And I would actually like to have more ISR and really be able to use it, because what it helps me to do is to develop targets so we can go strike. At the same time, as we develop those targets, the more ISR I have, I can minimize the risk to civilian casualty and continue the precision air campaign that we have.
And then just one last question. How useful have the Special Operations Forces on the ground in Iraq and Syria been for gathering more intelligence for targeting?
Well, it's a combination of things that they were able to do. Part of it is there is some of that to gather some information for intel, but it's the advise and assist piece that they do with the indigenous forces, whether it's in Syria or Iraq. And the thing I will tell you that I find is the level of confidence I think that the ground forces have since the time I've been here. I got here last June. Has continued to increase, and I think it's based on the level of training they're getting in some of the training sites, whether it's with our conventional forces or our special operation forces, that has actually gotten us to a point where we're able to, we as the air component can strike, and you have a ground force that can go in and do what they need to do to move Daesh out of that particular area.
Again, thank you, General, for doing this. This is Carla Babb with Voice of America. I wanted to talk about your comments about increasing strikes in Fallujah in comparison to some of the other places last week. How has that affected your strikes shaping the Mosul operations? Because I noticed in some of the airstrike releases, you're still striking Mosul, but are you having to strike less because you're shifting to Fallujah, or are you striking the same amount?
It from week to week it flexes a little bit, and really based on the ski maneuver that's on the ground. And so, from my perspective, what we try to do is we try to keep a constant bit of pressure really across the entire area. And so we are still striking in Mosul. Does it drop down a percentage point or two? Yeah, potentially, but it's not a major shift away, because that's the beauty of our air power, is we're able to range the entire battle space and strike in a number of different locations, simultaneously on the same day type of thing, which allows us to be able to continue to put pressure on Daesh. And so when there's a ground maneuver, we tend to put a little bit more, whether it's a strike capability as ISR there to support that part, but we don't really strip everything away from one location to go to another. We have the capability to cover both.
Hi, General Gordon Lubold from the Wall Street Journal. Two unrelated questions. One is on the conversations with the Russians, is that like kind of on the staff operational level, is that hourly, daily, weekly? Can you characterize that? And then separate question altogether, Afghanistan, can you kind of update us on the airstrike campaign against the Taliban when it's called for in defensive operations, and also the Islamic State strikes that you've been striking since I think January?
Sure. First on the Russians. So every other day we have a MOU working group, and so I have a colonel here in my headquarters that talks to his counterpart that sits in Syria, and they'll talk about safety and ensure that we're executing the MOU in the spirit of in the spirit and intent of the MOU. We do phone checks every day to make sure the line's good, because both of us have the opportunity to make out-of-cycle phone calls. So if something happens and we want to bring it to the other's attention, we're able to do that. And that process has actually worked out very well. So I've been very pleased with our ability to at least be able to talk about areas that if we have a concern that the Russians are doing something that's not in the spirit and intent of the MOU, and they've been responsive to go look at and investigate, and we do the same. When it comes to your question on Afghanistan, what I've seen is as I look at the really increasing authorities that have been provided to General Nicholson and his staff there, there's been a little uptick in the number of strikes in Afghanistan with the fighters we have there and some of the remotely piloted aircraft. But we continue to watch that, and I'm really more in a support role to General Nicholson, and he's probably, I would offer that he's probably better to answer that question. But we do provide air power from here, and it's from a scheduling standpoint to support the operation, and tankers from the Gulf to support the operation in Afghanistan.
Sir, if I could just clarify, the uptick in strikes, are you able to differentiate from where you sit between ISIS targets versus other targets, or what were you referring to there?
Just the number of strikes, and it's the commanders there that are in Afghanistan that do the execute the strikes. We just help provide the air power to do that. So they run the command and control for that part of it. We're just the provider of the air power to support it.
Hi, General. It's Brian Everstein with Air Force Magazine. I wanted to follow up on the numbers question that Christina asked about. When we had talked in Florida a few months ago, you talked about your EKG chart in your office, how you track your peaks and valleys of aircraft that's deployed. Are we sitting at a peak right now? Do you have ample aircraft deployed, and are you looking at any valleys coming soon? And also, if we get back to the B-52s, when they deployed to replace the B-1s that at the time were flying record operations, record number of airstrikes, going Winchester all the time on their missions, are B-52s flying at that same pace?
So as the EKG chart that you talked about, really it's a forecasting tool that I've been using, which I didn't necessarily, I don't know if the staff had something similar before I got here, but it helps me to take a look at where we're going to have peaks and valleys in air power. And so right now we're probably just a little bit lower because the carriers left, but another carrier is coming, so it's not a long-term concern. And we have and we do a lot of analysis to make sure we're able to cover the requirements with the air power we have. So I'm not overly concerned with the capacity that we have, whether it's a strike or ISR. From a, give me your second question again. I just dropped it.
Just about the B-52 pace, if they're keeping up where the B-1s left off.
The B-52s are they're doing well, and I'll tell you one of the maybe to correct something, the B-1s weren't going Winchester all the time. I mean, they went to Winchester periodically. They didn't go Winchester with the B-1s a dramatic amount. But the B-52s are doing well, and they're able to pick up where them and the other strike platforms are able to pick up and execute. You have to also realize that B-52s haven't been out into this AOR for a number of years, so there are some things that they're going through in order from a logistics standpoint and those kinds of things to make sure they've got everything they need, and that piece is going well. And what I'm seeing is that they are actually picking up the pace. After they've got here and got their, they've been here for I want to say 6 weeks now, thereabouts. And what I'm seeing is their tempo continues to increase, and they provide some capabilities that the B1 doesn't necessarily have in some areas. So it's not necessarily an apples for apples comparison. So to me, it's another strike platform, and I like having them here.
General, hi, it's Paul Shinkman with U.S. News and World Report. I was a couple minutes late, so I'm sorry if I missed this, but can you talk a little bit about the kind of momentum that you referenced going into Fallujah? Are forces preparing to actually go into the city right now, or is it still shaping operations? What kinds of airstrikes are you conducting for what's happening on the ground?
Well, it's a little bit of both. We were shaping ahead of, but we also see as they start moving in, we're doing some more dynamic strikes. We've done a number of deliberate strikes in Fallujah over the course of the past year, really about 38 or so. And what we see is as the ground force goes in there, our strike tempo, as far as a ratio between deliberate and dynamic, becomes more dynamic. And so what I do see is I read the intel is that the Iraqi forces are moving, into the continue to move towards and into the city. And really, as you look at it, as they go into the city, they're moving at a little different paces, depending on what sector of the city you're looking at. But our job there is to actually provide overwatch and air power to strike if they run into issues there with Daesh. At the same time, ensure we're minimizing any type of civilian casualties.
And going back to the question about Mosul, I understand that you've not changed generally in the number of strikes that you're doing, but are the kinds of strikes that you're doing there changed? Has the ground momentum there slowed at all as the Iraqi government is sort of moving CTS forces more toward Fallujah now?
Not necessarily. I mean, back earlier in this particular year, in the past several months ago, we were hitting a number of monetary centers there. It's really the type of strikes. I would say, and some of these are logistics, some of the command and control centers. And we've also hit some mobile refinery oil type facilities just north of Mosul. So it's really a mix of different type of targets, but still keeping the same level of pressure is really the goal.
Sir Austin Wright from Politico. First, a follow-up. In response to Courtney's question earlier, you said that sometimes you get frustrated when you're not able to use air power to the full capability. What are some factors that can cause it not to be used to the full capability?
Well, I mean, some of this is we do a level of overwatch, and what I don't want to do is one of the things we try to do is we have targets we call deliberate on call, and those are deliberate targets that we're going to strike eventually, but based on the way we're doing the overwatch missions, we don't have them on the air tasking order for that particular day. And so what we'll try to do is if that particular strike asset is finishing up its overwatch mission, hasn't expended all their weapons, and it's a good match for one of these targets, then on the way home, we'll have them go strike those targets. And basically what it allows me to do is actually increase the use of the air power. So that's one area. The other is how we use some of the ISR. As much as folks like full motion video, it's an opportunity to go look at things and watch things. But I joke with our staff here is, when I came in the Air Force, we didn't have full motion video. and we were able to go strike and execute campaigns without, being able to look at some of those things. So we got to make sure we're able to do some things either with the ISR or the strike platforms, and it's not necessarily being creative. It's just using some of the doctrine that we've trained in other locations, and sometimes it's breaking a little bit of the paradigm and the mindset, and looking for opportunities. One of the areas I've done that as well is actually taking a little bit of ISR and using a strike asset with a targeting pod and doing some non-traditional ISR and going out and searching areas to find targets that we can strike. And they're not up where the close fight is, where the land component is looking at. We're looking just a little bit deeper to strike some targets, so that way we can actually take things off the battlefield and they can't get to where that close fight is. And so it's opportunities like that I'm trying to take advantage of. And it's me personally working with my staff, but also working with the CJTF for opportunities like that.
And back in February, Secretary Carter said that we're running low on some of the precision munitions that we use against ISIL the most. Where are we on that now? Is that a concern for you?
It's still a concern. We have to balance that to ensure that we don't, there's certain weapons. We do a lot of precision guided munitions, and you have to think about, the way I look at this is, we were drawn down in Afghanistan, and across DOD, the weapons buy was probably didn't forecast for this particular operation. And oh, by the way, that many of our partners are employing ordnance, whether it's here in Iraq and Syria, or in Pakistan, or in the Yemen operation. So there's a lot of people employing ordnance right now, precision guided munitions, that weren't forecast. I know the Air Force has taken some steps to increase in the next POM to buy more weapons, and when you do that, those weapons are about 2 years or so away, if not more. The other piece we have to look at is we have stocks around the world that support not only Central Command but other combatant commands, and we have to do some analysis of where we take risk. And what I mean by that is, where do we pull some weapons from that we're saving for other contingencies, and do we use them now or do we save them for later? And so it's really the constant analysis that we do here at our headquarters, working with CENTCOM, and then CENTCOM working with the Joint Staff and Combatant Commands of how we balance the weapons we have. So it's something we pay attention to, and we want to be good stewards as well. I just don't want to go out there wasting weapons just because we can go strike something. I want to make sure that each weapon hits a meaningful target as much as possible.
General, it's Louis Martinez with ABC News. Yesterday and a couple of days ago, there were strikes near Palmyra. What kind of coordination is there with the Russians now that there are Russian troops in Palmyra? Is it any different than the regular contacts that you've had? And also, with regards to the Syrian Democratic Forces offensive north of Raqqa, what kind of targets are you hitting with respect to that? Is it different shaping than what we're seeing around Fallujah?
For the strike in Palmyra, we don't do any coordination with the Russians. We don't talk to them about where we're going to strike or what we're going to do. I'm not going to ever provide them that level of detail. We're going to do what we need to do in order to go against Daesh, and that's the message when my 06 talks to the Russians, we're going to fly and execute what we need to. Now, we do pay attention to it, though. Just like we don't want to have collateral damage, we don't have a miscalculation that causes a bigger problem for us by striking a place where there might be Russians. So we do take great care in where we're going to strike, and we're going to strike the targets that we need to strike against Daesh. For the strikes there in northern Syria, the shaping operations there are probably not much different than, and I don't see in the strikes we're doing there aren't much different from the strikes we've done in Fallujah, or when we went into Hit, or when we did around Sinjar. It's really, we're taking out locations where they have weapons caches, C2 nodes, logistics, so they can't get to the fight, command and control, and really execute the operation. So same type of targets, generally.
So following up on Raqqa, so it's less of tactical dynamic strikes up there?
Well, the dynamic strikes really kind of depend on our scheme of maneuver, but what the adversary is doing. And if there's fewer adversary Daesh out there, then and they don't present themselves, then you may not be a requirement to strike it. If there's nothing shooting there, nothing happening, then you may not need to strike it. But we're overwatched just in case we do. But what we do see typically is when we have at least the trend I've seen over the course of the past year is when there's ground maneuver, Daesh presents itself, which gives us opportunities to strike. And so typically I do see a little bit of a upswing in areas where we have movement. And we put air power overhead. They tend to actually have an opportunity to deploy more in those locations than others.
Hi, General. Oriana Pollock here with Air Force Times. General Welsh briefed this morning, and he made a statement about how we need the weapons of tomorrow today to be successful, especially in air campaigns such as this one. And I was wondering, you had said earlier that, you would like to see maybe a little bit more ISR capability, but do the capabilities you have now, are they flexible enough, or are there other types of weapon capabilities that the CENTCOM AOR needs to progress in this air campaign against ISIS?
No, I think the weapons we have today are flexible enough, and we actually work with all the squadrons and wings and the coalition partners, so that when they load their aircraft, we kind of work with them to say, here's the type of weapons we think we're going to need on a day-to-day basis. So they don't go out the door with get everyone with just one type of weapon. They usually carry a mix of weapons on their aircraft to give us a mix of flexibility. Example I'd also use is, a two-ship of fighters. The flight lead and the wingman may not have the same weapons loadout, and that gives us max flexibility, because when we get airborne, particularly if we're going to a place where we think there's going to be dynamic targets, we don't know exactly what the target's going to be. Much different from a deliberate target, where before those aircraft get airborne, they have a pretty good idea what targets they're going against, and we're able to do a bit more analysis, which may change the load because it's tied to a specific mission. And so we do have quite a bit of flexibility, so I'm not overly concerned in that regard. It's, to a previous question, just ensure that we always have enough to be able to execute is one of the things that, not that I worry about, but it's something I make sure I articulate so that those that are helping support us know what our requirements are.
And another quick question. I know the focus has been to find an alternative to GPS. Have you seen adversaries like ISIS or perhaps the Taliban in Afghanistan using GPS jammers against our capabilities?
I've not seen that, and I really don't honestly worry about it, because I think we've done a pretty good job. Even with some of our GPS weapons, the GPS jamming doesn't really impact it.
Hi, General. This is Jamie Crawford from CNN. Thanks for doing this. Following up on your comments of how there's been an uptick in the number of strikes in Afghanistan, I'm curious, in the aftermath of the strike against the Doctors Without Borders hospital on Kunduz last year, has that incident changed how the air campaign is approached? Has it reduced the tempo or changed the rules of engagement of how you operate in Afghanistan in the air?
I'd have to maybe defer a little more to General Nicholson on that, but I'll just talk to him in a general sense. The real takeaway for something like that, because it applies for us here in the operation we do in Iraq and Syria, is to make sure we are going with the rules of engagement, and the communication and the coordination between all of the elements is very key to ensure we minimize any type of civilian casualties or collateral damage. So I'll tell you that we go through great and very deliberate and process to do that. And really, I'll also tell you that what I find is that more times than not, and really the goal with our crews there is, if they have any doubt, then they typically do not drop. And I really can't speak to the Kunduz specifics on that, but we spend a lot of time talking about it and ensure that the crews understand the intent and guidance from my level and the leadership above my level.
Then on the air campaign in Iraq and Syria with the coalition, realizing that the United States carries out the vast number of airstrikes in that campaign, I'm just curious if you can talk a little bit about the contributions from the other coalition countries in the air. Do you feel like you're getting enough support from the other countries when it comes to air support in the campaign against ISIS in Iraq and Syria?
I do. I really do. And really, this is what I tell the coalition partners. Each nation brings a unique set of capabilities. In some cases, we may both fly F-16s, but their F-16s are a little bit different than ours, and they may carry a different weapon. Or a French Mirage may carry a different weapon that has a different capability. Or they have an ISR platform that has a little bit different capability. Or they have a tanker versus having a boom has a drogue that can maybe support refueling a Navy aircraft, for example. And so each one of them comes in with a capability. And what I tell my staff and my goal is to make sure we do everything we can to incorporate the capability that's offered by our coalition partners and take max advantage of the opportunities that they provide us. And I'll give you a quick example. The Air Force does not do tactical reconnaissance on fighter aircraft. We quit doing that a number of years ago. But we have a couple of partners that are part of the coalition that have that capability. And they've actually been, it's been a real plus because it's a way we can go get some intelligence fairly quickly on a fast-moving aircraft to go take some pictures and video and then get that back to us fairly quickly. So I've been very pleased with the coalition contributions. And the last piece I would also offer is this: the representatives we have here in the CAOC, the perspectives they provide, and sometimes when they ask us, some tough questions about our thought process, just because we give a larger percentage doesn't necessarily mean that we've cornered the market on all the answers. And so it's helpful to get their different perspectives because of their different backgrounds. And I think it makes us sharper as a coalition and results in a better execution overall.
General Eric Schmidt from the New York Times. What's the current level of U.S. support to the Saudi-led campaign in Yemen, both against the Houthis and against AQAP there?
Our support to the Yemen operation is actually very small. It's a small amount of ISR and a small amount of tanker support. Really about 10 to 15 tanker sorties a week. And we do have a small contingent of airmen liaison team that's in the AOC in Riyadh to support and provide some advice. But by and large, the bulk of the operation is really done by the Saudi-led coalition, and the coalition members are part of that. And we're a very small percentage of that particular operation.
Contribution winding down over the summer?
You broke up there. Can you repeat the first part of your question?
Do you envision that contribution winding down over the course of the summer?
Well, that's tough to tell. I mean, right now there is a cessation of hostilities. As I've talked to some of the partners that are engaged in that particular operation, they may not be employing as much, but they haven't really decreased their flying. Our tempo hasn't really decreased in support of the operations there. And I think, based on the negotiations that are ongoing in Kuwait, time will tell whether or not things will slow down there for Yemen.
General Lucas Tomlinson, Fox News. How aggressive is your pursuit of the ISIS leader, Baghdadi?
Well, I can't speak to that because that's another part of the CJTF that works that part. I know we help provide air power in support of that, but I really can't get into specifics on that.
So if given the order to take him out, would you do that?
If I'm given an order, unless it's immoral or illegal, I'm going to follow it. I mean, that's part of my duty as a member of the United States Air Force.
And just a different topic on budget cuts. Have budget cuts impacted the air war at all? And can you talk about cannibalization of your aircraft out in the Middle East? And recently visited Ellsworth Air Force Base and learned that half the B-1s can't fly. I'm just wondering how cuts to your force are impacting the fight against ISIS. Thank you.
As the operational execution and I was out here as a deputy AFCENT commander doing sequestration. And the way the services do, they front load and support the operations that are forward, and then they take an impact on readiness back at home station. And I will also tell you that what I've seen with the Air Force and others is the other services as well as readiness is one that they've been focused on, and so we don't get impacted by it. By and large, I understand it because it does have an impact if I ask for more assets, which is why I want to be a good steward about what I ask for, is realizing that it's going to have an impact on a unit and the readiness of the unit back home in order to have the next rotation to be ready. On the B-1s real quick, I know the B-1s are going through an upgrade, a major upgrade, which will increase their capabilities and kind of give them a glass cockpit. So I don't know the specific on Ellsworth, but I do know that that's one reason why the B-1s aren't here right now is so they can get that upgrade. The reason why we have the B-52s here.
Hi, General. It's Carla Babb with VOA again. I just wanted to go back to when you were talking about getting up to full capability and having a level of overwatch, targets on call. I don't want to oversimplify, but I'm trying to understand what you were talking about. Are you saying that you're doing too much overwatch and not enough striking? And are there targets, they're high value targets that you're just watching that you feel that you have the ability to strike that you're not striking?
No. Let me clarify. So the overwatch is if there's a ground maneuver, we're going to have airplanes there to support the troops that are on the ground. It's no different than what we've done in Afghanistan. It's the same kind of mindset here, and because you don't know when the enemy has a vote, so you don't know when the enemy is going to do something. And we can't, I can't have an aircraft sitting down in a UAE on strip alert because it's a 3-hour drive to get from UAE up into Iraq or Syria. So that's the reason why they have to airplanes overhead. On the deliberate piece, what I'm trying to do is if there's for example, if we had Overwatch and nothing happened during that time frame, they still have weapons available, but I know there's a target that we can go strike, then I want to match them up to that target. And that's why we call it kind of a deliberate on call. So we have targets that can be serviced or struck. And now we have a aircraft that has weapons on its way home and has the gas to go do it. We'll go and strike it versus them coming home and not coming back another day to strike it if the opportunity presents itself. So it's really just taking advantage of opportunities is the way I would describe it.
General Jamie McIntyre from the Washington Examiner. I missed the very top of your remarks. I apologize if you've addressed this issue, but as no doubt you're well aware, the United States is not providing the same kind of close air support to Afghan forces battling the Taliban in Afghanistan as it is for Iraqi forces and forces in Syria battling ISIL. If the authorities were to change to permit that kind of closer coordination with Afghan forces, would that require an increase in assets in the Central Command area of responsibility, or is that a task that you could handle with what you've got on hand?
Well, it's a task that we can handle with the forces we have on hand, and there's opportunities sometimes in extremis to support the Afghan forces, and that's General Nicholson's decision on how he might do that. If there's a dramatic change, then we'd have to go back and reassess whether or not we need more capability and capacity there in Afghanistan to support.
Hi, General. Marcus Weisgerber again. Have U.S. aircraft have they had any run-ins with Iranian aircraft at all throughout this since you've been there?
No, not since I've been here. And I don't really. Actually, I was here as a deputy from 2013 to 14, and we didn't have any then either that I'm aware of.
All right, General, thank you very much with that. We appreciate your time, and thank you for coming out to see us. Any final words for us, sir, before we sign off?
Sure. First of all, thanks again for the opportunity to talk with you today. It's my real pleasure to share with you what we are doing, how we're doing it, and I'll tell you, I'm extremely proud to have the opportunity to lead and be part of this coalition. We've got a lot of great folks making things happen, really all across the AOR, and it's not just the airmen, but it's a complete joint and coalition team, and it's really impressive the work that we're doing. And like I said early in my opening remarks, we have momentum, and my goal is to keep the foot on the gas and keep pressing hard, and that's why I made the comments about I want to take full advantage of our capabilities. If there's more we can be doing, I want to be able to do it. And I appreciate your support back home for the folks that are out here deployed. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you, sir.